I'm David Martin Davies, and I'm the host of Texas Matters and The Source on Texas Public Radio KSTX. When I hear the terms Texas Public Radio, real, reliable radio, what it means to me is that we are thinking about our listeners and what information they need today. When we deal with this pandemic, this is a pandemic that attacks our society. And if we have a fractured society, that allows the virus to really tear us apart. If we can bring people together, explain in clear terms why they should wear a mask, why you should practice social distancing, why you should take coronavirus seriously, that is real and it is reliable and it is something that is our foundation, it is our ballast. This is what we want to do here at Texas Public Radio. One reason why The Source is critical at a time like today, like right now during the pandemic and during this time of great anxiety, we say it every day when we start to show off. This is a community conversation. This is an opportunity for everyone to call in, to listen in, and to have their say. We want to keep public in public radio. It's an opportunity for people to join and help drive the conversation, jump in, keep us honest with what we're talking about, and so we just don't enter an echo chamber. So that is critical for how we produce The Source. During the pandemic, so much is being exposed about what is happening in our community. Vulnerabilities that we knew were there, but now they're so much more evident. Lack of access to education for certain communities, the fact that we have parts of San Antonio that are being left behind. With these conversations, with the San Antonio Area Foundation, we covered specific areas of San Antonio, youth success, and communities in San Antonio that are being left behind. We wanted to talk about them in a way that was real, that dug deep into the reality of people's lives, and come up with solutions for if we apply resources right now, we can keep families from falling further behind. But it's going to take work, it's going to take conversations, it's going to take understanding across the board of San Antonio. Fortunately, we have smart people who are working on these things right now. What we can do with The Source on Texas Public Radio is be a platform and have the community call in and hear what's going on and have their input. So you can have smart people and have meetings and do these things and have agendas all day long, but we have to make sure this gets to the streets of San Antonio. And that's the role that we want to play. Texas Matters is an opportunity for me to take a step back, look at the news a little differently, and produce a program that asks the tough questions. I'm able to get newsmakers on from across the state and have them sometimes put them in the hot seat. We have talked about what's happening with the pandemic, what's happening with schools, what's happening with the distribution of tests in Texas, and why is Texas not doing better in dealing with the coronavirus. And some people don't want those questions asked, and they certainly don't want to hear the answers, but that's what we do on Texas Matters. And we want to hold our elected officials accountable. The bottom line that we have for Texas Matters is that we want to explain how public policy impacts the lives of people in Texas. And never before has that been more evident through this coronavirus pandemic. How did the decisions that Governor Greg Abbott made or didn't make, how has that impacted the spread of the virus? People need to know, and they need to ask these questions, and that's what we do. These are trying times. These are tough times. Hopefully, we'll be able to look back on 2020 with wonder and say, how did we get through that? And how we did get it, and how we are getting through it is because we are coming together. We do have great supporters. News is being challenged right now on multiple levels. We're all being asked to do much more with fewer resources. Fortunately, here at Texas Public Radio, we have the support of listeners like you. And you have kept us on the air, and you've given us the resources to go out and get these stories, not only to tell people what's happening day to day, but also document this for the future, because these are history-making days. And we don't know what's going to be coming around the corner. I mean, 2021 could even be even crazier than 2020. I hate to think, but it's a possibility. But Texas Public Radio is going to be here to tell these stories and inform you with real, reliable radio because of your support. And thank you. You're listening to The Source on Texas Public Radio, 89.1 FM. I'm David Martin Davies. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, San Antonio experienced losses in both life and economic stability. Employment, housing, and food security have fallen off a cliff, and simultaneously there's a call for reforms to policing due to documented brutality and systemic racism. How do we rebuild moving forward? What does that look like for a city like San Antonio? How can we rebuild in a way that addresses racial inequalities and economic disparity? We're joined this afternoon by an all-star panel. We've got Ana Margarita Cha Guzman, Doctor of Education, Chair of the San Antonio Housing Authority and former President of Palo Alto College, Commissioner Tommy Calvert, Precinct 4 at the Bexar County Commissioner's Court, Ana Sandoval, San Antonio City Council, Representative for District 7. This is a special source, a vital conversation made possible by the John L. Santigos Charitable Foundation, a fund of the San Antonio Area Foundation. And I'm going to play a voicemail we have.
Hi, this is Cosima. I am fortunate to live in Beacon Hill, where community engagement and neighborly interaction are highly valued and practiced. This practice has led to the development of a strong network of neighbors that are there for each other, whether that means helping with physical tasks, childcare needs, food insecurity, or emotional support during a difficult time. Sometimes it means working to find ways to help people stay in their homes and provide stability. It seems to me that resiliency comes from the strength a neighborhood has to take care of itself and rely on the need for outside intervention less. By promoting big gun solutions instead of bottom-up capacity building, I fear that resiliency will never take hold. What can your panelists suggest for helping build resilience from within? Thank you.
Tommy Calvert, Precinct 4, having stable neighborhoods allows people to build a matrix of support, but it seems like in times of crisis, we do need big guns to come in to help bring things about. What's your response?
Yeah, I actually, in some degrees, disagree because I used to run a small global human rights organization, and I went into war zones in places like Sudan and Burma, and I found that some of the big United Nations kind of groups did not do the best work that smaller community-based organizations did. And really, when we look at economic impact, micro-gardening of an area is very important to reinvest dollars within the neighborhoods. So I actually agree with that concept that we have a lot of nonprofits that are going to die because the bureaucracy believes that from a scoring matrix, the larger organizations are better suited to take care of the needs. But there really does need to be an effort to make sure that the capacity can grow in some of the areas where there hasn't been good investment, that we actually stand them up much stronger through a variety of stair steps. One of the ways that we're starving these organizations is the length of time to actually get them stimulus dollars. So the mayor and the county judge asked all of us to be a part of various committees. We started that work in April, I believe, and finished our report May 22nd, but yet here we are in August, and the dollars still haven't been awarded to nonprofits. So in that lapse of time and moving so slowly, many nonprofits can't raise money and are going to die, especially the small ones. The large ones will survive, but I'm not sure if that's part of the vulture capitalist part, where only the big boys with the big donors are the ones who are going to be part of the relief, or if we're going to have a truly equitable empowerment of funds and not just talk about it as the city and county often do.
Have an email question. Says the answer is pretty simple about resiliency. Divest from the overinflated $500 million budget for SAPD and reinvest those funds back into the community. Ana Sandoval, representative for District 7 at the City Council. You have something to do with that budget. What do you say?
I think that's a conversation that we're all having. I think ultimately our role as elected officials when we approve that budget is to do right by the taxpayers and do right by the residents of San Antonio. And how do we invest that money in a way that gives the community what it needs and also what is being directly asked of us? I do believe there is probably a more efficient way to spend some of that money, specifically around law enforcement. If you heard Commissioner Calvert's comments earlier about how the jail is really serving as a place for the mentally ill, well, our police force is part of that, right? Part of that whole system that may be taking the mentally ill people to jail. So, and like the commissioner said, they come in week after week, or we have people who frequently come back. So clearly what we're doing right now is not the solution to that. It's like we're repeating the same thing over and over again. So now we're overdue to look at how we can improve that better. There is one program in the police department called the Mental Health Unit, and what that group does is it's got some police officers, but it also partners with Center for Healthcare Services to provide mental health support and follow-up for those people who would have probably been arrested and gone back to jail, but instead they get the mental health treatment they deserve. That is one small example. I believe there may be other opportunities like that. My committee will be reviewing alternatives to that. There are options in, examples that we've seen in other parts of the country that really expand on that model. And the idea is not to reduce law enforcement or to reduce safety, but how do we make the best use of our dollars so that the community can thrive? So it's not something that we can do overnight. I know that there are certainly demands to do that. We can't just suddenly move $400 million and then not have a law enforcement department. We do have to figure out how to do that in a way that's going to be sustainable and successful. So we're definitely open to looking at that.
My name is Alice Williams, and I'm one of the producers for The Source. The Source is a live call-in talk show that we host 4 days a week, and it is a conversation about just about everything. We try and touch on so many different topics because all of our listeners, we can proudly say we have a diverse audience and we live in a diverse city. So we want to express as many ideas and opinions and bring awareness to many different issues as possible. We are San Antonio specific, but because we get so unique, it has broad appeal. So I really think that outside of our, San Antonio City Council shows and things like that, I really believe that anybody in the country can listen to our podcast or find our webpage and find something that they want to listen to or learn more about. So I would gather to say, probably like many of you, if you are not, if you haven't been working from home this whole time, one member of your team has, or most members of your team, or all of you. So distance just within our work environment and our team, that is definitely something that many people have had to overcome and that we have had to overcome here at TPR. And then just having guests be remote all of them. It's not my favorite. I like people in studio. I like seeing their facial expressions. I like the interaction between Dave and a guest or a candidate when he's pressing them a little bit to clarify their answer, or when Dave has really tender moments with a guest, and maybe it's a little bit difficult for them to be on air, and there's an ease that comes with being in person, and that's lost now. I want people to feel seen and heard. I want them to feel like they have a voice here on Texas Public Radio. And if their voice isn't represented, that they can call in and they can be that voice for somebody else, and give that opinion and share their story. And I think I want people to donate because I want them to feel a part of this. I want them to feel a part of our community and be a member and be with TPR, and we're all in this together in this crazy year. So why not do it with a community that respects and values every opinion?
Hello, I'm David Martin Davies. I'm the host of The Source on Texas Public Radio. Today we're continuing our vital conversation about youth success. This discussion will focus on how local nonprofits, organizations are fostering youth success in San Antonio. Our event today is part of a series of vital conversations made possible by the John L. Santikos Charitable Foundation, a fund of the San Antonio Area Foundation. Our panelists today include Patricia Mejia, Vice President of Community Engagement and Impact for the San Antonio Area Foundation. Patricia, welcome to The Source. Welcome to our program.
Thank you for having us.
Also with us, Andrea Figueroa, Executive Director of the Martinez Street Women's Center. Andrea, it's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Carla Aguilar joins us, Development Coordinator and Interim Cultural Arts Coordinator for the American Indians in Texas at the Spanish Colonial Missions. Carla Aguilar, it's great to have you.
Hi, David. Good afternoon.
And also with us is Ada Saenz, the COO of the Boys and Girls Club of San Antonio. Ada Saenz, great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So in this pandemic, children have been directly impacted with what's happening with the response to COVID, trying to keep them and our community safe. Schools closed and now they're reopening in some fashion. But one metric is showing us that we've got a problem. The three largest school districts here in San Antonio are reporting thousands of students are missing from the rolls. They're not showing back up. They're just gone. So what happened to these kids? Where did they go? Is this just lost in the COVID shuffle? Are they going to be part of a lost COVID generation? So we're calling this a vital conversation, and that is a deliberate word. This is vital. We're talking about a situation where all hands should be on deck. We should be worried. We should be concerned. We should be taking action about what we need to be doing right now to make sure that we don't leave kids behind in the COVID situation, in this pandemic, and then also moving forward, how we can emerge from the pandemic in a stronger situation with greater awareness of the challenges that many of our children, our community's children, they belong to each of us. How can we recognize what are the challenges in their lives? How can we help them succeed? And whatever that success looks like, that's up to them to determine. But we want to help each and every one of them to reach their fullest potential. So how do we do that? So vital means important, but right now it also means urgent. And we want everyone in the community to join the conversation as we want to get input. We got to crowdsource what is going on out in the community and how can we shepherd the resources that we have. That means collaboration. That means finding nonprofits that are fully engaged and that know these communities and know these families and how we can bring it all together. And at the center of that was the San Antonio Area Foundation and how they want to have these different sensors in the community, informing them about what San Antonio needs and how they can be a role in delivering resources. So Patricia Mejia, if you could talk about what the San Antonio Area Foundation is doing right now.
Yeah, thank you. You've given an incredible introduction to the issue. You know, we recognize that the inequities that our young people were experiencing prior to the pandemic were really shameful. There are two, three various different communities within our community, and I think because we pride ourselves in being a welcoming, sometimes those inequities are not so good to look at, and we sometimes glaze them over. But these women on this panel are really on the front lines and have been prior to the pandemic, looking at equity right at, in the eyes and saying, how can we do better? What is our moral obligation to ensure that every child in this city has equal opportunity? And really what the Area Foundation wanted to do with these conversations is to really hone in on what are the inequities and how can we build back better? How can we make sure that we're creating the collaborations, that we're providing the resources to all of the different entities that really touch young people's lives? We know it's not just nonprofits, it's not just school systems. You're seeing grandparents play critical roles in helping people get onto their Zoom classrooms. And so for us, it's about hosting a conversation to really look at the complexity that's before us when we're looking at making a young person successful, and really looking at it from an asset perspective. There are many negative things that we can talk about from the inequities that exist in our community, but there are also so many beautiful things that our community is rich in culture that we can really serve as a foundation. And these women are really on the front lines. I would say they were on before COVID, and now they've put on different armor to make sure. And we simply want to host this conversation to really drive attention to the wonderful work that they're doing.
The community can join us with questions and comments. There's a chat function on GoToWebinar. You can do it there, or you could also email us at thesource@tpr.org. Hopefully, what I want to encourage all of our guests is to try to communicate through story. If you could help us understand what you've seen working in your areas. You don't have to tell us precisely who it is that you're talking about. We can preserve their privacy. But if you could tell us a little bit about a journey that you've seen, and maybe a success, maybe a not success, close success, something that would help communicate to people listening, what are the challenges, what do we need to be doing, what can we do better? And so Carla Aguilar, I want to ask you, at the American Indians of Texas, at the Spanish Colonial Missions, if you could talk about, your community, why this is vital conversation is important to you.
Thank you, David. Our organization, American Indians in Texas at the Spanish Colonial Missions, right? It's a mouthful. Maybe many people may not know what the spectrum of our programs actually look like. We have 3 branches of programming, which include the Indigenous arts, civic engagement, and a very multi-layered, integrative health and wellness programming, where a lot of our engagement with families across San Antonio takes place. All of our programming and services is open to all residents. They don't have to be from a particular tribal community or have to demonstrate, in tribal activity in order to be able to receive our programs and services. And so in our approach and why this conversation around youth is so incredibly important is that we integrate a philosophy that we call La Cultura Cura, or that culture heals. It is the invisible thread that works through all 3 branches of programming for the organization. And through particularly our male engagement work, we are seeking to be able to rebalance and really heal the infrastructure of our families across San Antonio. The way that we reach young people is using the same philosophy, but when a young person comes and participates in our program, their parents are also involved in classes and additional service provision that we offer, because we know that oftentimes it's compounded scenarios for a lot of these families where, they may be unemployed, they may have mixed immigration status. Illiteracy, is something that's so prevalent in our families as well. Language barriers and multiple different factors. And so in our programming here since the onset of the pandemic, we haven't been directly working with young people since. The majority of our work has been directly working with the parents. And so to be able to give an example of how our programming is so relevant and important in this time of great tension and uncertainty in households because of the poverty that exists is that our classes from our Healing the Wounded Spirit family violence prevention programming, which, obviously they have children. And so we're impacting, the child abuse rates and the domestic violence rates through these classes that just at the beginning of the pandemic, we had 7 classes that were meeting face to face. Starting in 2 weeks, we will have 20 classes that are serving families digitally. We didn't know that the digital format was going to work for us to be able to reach more families, but the spike in folks seeking that kind of support, curriculum-based, evidence-based, as much as we can to be able to provide tools for families to be able to hold it together while they're going through this process. Often these families completing these classes is contingent in their ability to be able to get their children back from CPS. And so really complex things that are happening behind the scenes that have to keep going. These families continue to need the support. And so while we're talking about young people and centering young people in the scenario, young people need to rest and be held in a sacred way by their family. And so the approach that our organization has is reintroducing this language of parenting, being fatherhood being sacred, that our children are sacred, our conversations with them are sacred, and being able to give them the tools to restore the family in that way through our various programs. And there's a whole spectrum of pieces. So I mentioned Healing the Wounded Spirit, but for young people, the approach is the Rites of Passage program, right? And within that Rites of Passage, which is an integral part of our cultural experience as a people that has greatly been lost. Yes, there's quinceañeras and cotillions and so forth, but the process of transitioning from adolescence into adulthood, particularly in high trauma environments, there's a really key opportunity there to help a young person reroute themselves in their culture in order to be able to operate in a more harmonious way with their family and in community. But that's just a glimmer of how it is that our programming is creating solutions or trying to steer solutions in a new direction.
Ada Signs at the Boys and Girls Clubs of San Antonio. What's been happening during the pandemic with how you interact with the youth there? I know that typically the kids, I know I did when I would go to the boys club after school and on weekends and play basketball and stuff. What happens? What's been happening there?
Sure. So the Boys and Girls Clubs in San Antonio, we serve kids ages 6 to 18, typically in after-school programming during the summertime. We say that when school is out, the clubs are in. So out-of-school time programming for youth in San Antonio, we're strategically placed in areas where kids need us most. So areas of high poverty, of high crime, and kind of desert areas where there are limited resources for kids and there's real safety issues for kids. And so we have traditional clubhouses where there are standalone clubhouses that kids come to be kids. And we are also, we partner with different school districts all across San Antonio to provide programming within the schools. And so when the pandemic first hit, it was during spring break, and we all thought that we were going to get an extra week off, and be able to just kind of hang out for a week and then we'll be back to normal. And as we all clearly know now, that was not the case. And we quickly had to figure out, how are we going to continue to live out our mission? How are we going to continue to support the communities and the families that we're supposed to be supporting? You know, we have people that have been we have families that have been part of our clubhouses for generations. And so we really build strong connections with the kids that we serve, with their families. Just like you said, you came to the Boys and Girls Clubs when it was the boys clubs, right? We have people who their parents came and now they work for us. And so it was really strong connections within our community. So we started reaching out. I mean, we started phone call after phone call, reaching out to every single family that we serve, asking them what their needs were. And the results, their feedback was scary because it was, they need vital, basic necessities is what they needed. They needed food. They needed help with rent. They needed safe places for their kids to go. They needed formula and diapers and, you know, all of those things that many of us are, you know, very lucky and fortunate to take for granted at times. And so we partnered with the food bank, who we've been partnering with for many years, and we were able to provide food to our families, both curbside lunches, but also pallets of produce. And we were also able to, because remember at that time, schools were just trying to figure out how to do this virtual learning. And so everybody was scrambling to try and figure out, how do we continue education during this stay-at-home time? And so we did online homework assistance with our kids. We did care packages for our families with basic necessities and with programming opportunities in there for kids to do at home with all the supplies that they would need to keep themselves engaged in a fun activity at home, to just be a kid. And so we did all of that until we were able to open our doors back up.
When did y'all do that?
During the summertime. So we were one of the first youth serving organizations in San Antonio to open our doors after COVID hit. And so we really took our time to go through CDC guidelines to make sure that we were going to be able to do it in a safe manner, to keep all of our kids safe, to keep all of our staff safe. And then once we were secure with knowing that, okay, we can really do this and do it in a safe way, we opened our doors, and it looked a lot different. We served a lot less kids because of social distancing, and there were a lot more specific parameters in place. There were no more fun field trips. We now do curbside pickup and drop off. And so it was a scary time, you know, to be open, especially for our staff who it was important for them to be there for their kids, our kids that we serve. And it was obviously important for them to have a job and to get a paycheck, but it was also scary because this was the first time that, you know, they've been around other people. So we went through that. And then at the end of the summer, we sent out a survey to all of our families asking, what do you need? What are your plans for the school year? How do you see yourself figuring out this educational piece for your family for this fall? And how do you need the Boys and Girls Clubs to support you? And the overwhelming response was that we need a safe place to send our kids so that we can work, so that we can provide for our families.